Footsteps echoed crisply against the marble floor. White light streamed through glass walls, reflecting the silhouettes of stylishly dressed figures. Smooth jazz drifted through the air as if everything here had been programmed to emit power and prestige. A young woman in a pale blue janitor's uniform was quietly polishing the front doors. Her face was calm, brown hair, tied low eyes following the streaks of moisture across the glass. None of the passing staff acknowledged her with so much as a nod. She was a silent shadow in a building blazing with brilliance. Suddenly, Thud, a designer handbag, hit the floor. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of an unspoken command that paused the entire lobby for a few seconds. A commanding woman, cream bodycon dress, white fur coat heels, sharp as razors, stood facing the girl, with the cleaning rag eyes slicing like blades. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice cracked through the air, sharp enough to need no microphone, drawing every gaze toward them. The girl stood her ground, no excuses, no retreat. "Who do you think you are, sitting in the president's chair?" The woman stepped closer, pointing directly at the sleek black seat in the center of the lobby, the one where the girl had just placed a water bottle and sat for a moment's rest. Silence. The receptionist looked away. A few staff bowed their heads and feigned checking their phones. And the girl, still standing, eyes steady, fingers clenched around the mop handle. No tears, no fury, but her gaze alone seemed to drop the temperature of the room. The woman scoffed with contempt. "Security, kindly escort this Cinderella impersonator off the premises. This is not the place for fairy tales." What no one knew was that in just 30 minutes, the entire executive board of Langford Global would be summoned to an emergency meeting. And the first person to walk through those doors would be the very girl they had just tried to throw out. 3 weeks before that fateful morning, there was no welcome party, no ceremonial ribbon cutting, just a grey morning and a job application submitted to the HR department under a completely unfamiliar name, Elise Moreno. But the woman behind that name was none other than Celeste Hartman, the sole heir to Langford Global, a billion-dollar media empire founded by her late father. After his sudden death from a stroke, Celeste returned from Europe, but not to walk straight into the CEO's office as everyone had expected. She had a different plan. "I can't lead a place I don't understand. And I can't understand it if people only look at me like I'm a CEO." With darkened hair, a janitor's uniform, and an ID badge with a fake name, she stepped into the very building that bore her family name through the back door. Working the night shift as a cleaner, she clocked in from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., moving through the dark unnoticed. And it was in that darkness that the truth began to reveal itself. She heard the CFO yelling at an assistant over a slightly bent report folder. She saw a young employee denied a raise, despite working overtime nearly every day. And she noticed how rare the words "thank you" were, how often eyes averted when passing by her. People didn't look at her like she were human. They looked at her like a maintenance object, a background function for the cleanliness they believed they deserved. But Celeste wasn't angry. She took notes. She listened. And little by little, she began to redraw the company's power map, using the very dust others tried to sweep under the rug. And amidst the apathy, she found flickers of light. Marcus, the IT engineer, always shared his lunch with the janitorial staff. Rosie, the middle-aged receptionist, gently supported those who had just been scolded by their bosses, and a young intern who each evening secretly dropped a few spare coins into the water machine so the cleaners wouldn't have to swipe their cards. Celeste realized not everyone in the company was rotten, but silence had become the weapon of indifference. And if no one else would break that silence, she would be the first. By day, They exchanged golden handshakes. By night, they became masks that no longer tried to smile. Celeste watched it all from behind the glass, from behind the mop, from behind eyes that were constantly overlooked. She didn't need a microphone to hear clearly, because the truth always revealed itself when no one thought they were being watched. Gregory Vale, Deputy CFO, was the first example. On the outside, he was the face of modern leadership, flashing a polished Rolex and speaking in a stream of TED Talk buzzwords. But one late night, Celeste happened to be standing behind the door of the 14th floor conference room when she heard him say something chilling. Those low-paid interns drain them dry and replace. Lose a few pawns and the game plays easier. And the laugh that followed wasn't that of a leader. It was the laugh of someone who had long learned to treat people as disposable tools. Sienna Walsh, the head of HR, didn't need to speak plainly. All she had to do was glance through the list, and those who didn't fit the brand image disappeared. Celeste once saw a file shredded hastily at the printer, 4 names, all from underprivileged neighborhoods, all people of color, all with near-perfect qualifications, and when she overheard Sienna whisper to her assistant, "They don't match the Langford vibe," she realized this wasn't recruitment, it was calculated exclusion. And the executive board, they didn't bother hiding the truth because they didn't see it as a problem. To them, employee salaries are overhead, health benefits are burdens, and anyone who dared speak up was swiftly reassigned to a remote branch modern-day exile, dressed as promotion. Celeste had once believed her father built an empire to nurture talent, but now she saw a chilling reality. The ones with the most power were the ones most terrified of being seen for who they truly were. They feared being exposed, feared that a janitor, someone whose name they never cared to remember, might be the one to unravel the rot they had coated in shine. Celeste didn't resist. She simply documented. In a small black leather-bound notebook, each name was written in red ink beneath a single heading, "The mask wearers inside my father's company." On a night of heavy rain, when nearly all the lights in Langford Tower had gone out, Celeste stood in the hallway on the 12th floor, wiping up the wet footprints left by employees' shoes. Not because her job required it, but because it was a habit of someone who refused to leave things messy no matter where she was. That was when Mrs. Rosie, the company's oldest receptionist, dropped her ceramic mug near the elevator. No one heard the shatter. Only Celeste turned back. She knelt down and picked up each shard as gently as if afraid they might feel pain. Rosie bent down too, her wrinkled hand trembling as she placed it gently on Celeste's shoulder. There was no textbook, "Thank you, no hollow, you're a good person." Just a single sentence whispered, like wind slipping through a door frame. "Been here a long time. I've learned good people don't need to win. They just need not to become bad." That night, Celeste didn't write a report. She didn't plan a retaliation. She simply sat alone on the emergency stairwell, holding a warm cup of tea Rosie had made, looking down at the still-lit city, and for the first time felt a quiet peace in the middle of a hollow world. The old receptionist didn't know who she was, didn't need to, but she looked at her like a person, not a uniform. The next day, Marcus, the quiet IT guy who always wore headphones, came to find her in the supply room. No small talk, no hesitation. He handed her a printed copy of a confidential email, a plan to reassign honest employees out of headquarters to make room for more manageable individuals. Marcus said, just one sentence. "I don't know who you are, but if you're who I think you are, please don't walk away." From that day on, everything changed, not loudly, not with banners, but it changed. A hot coffee cup was left waiting on the janitor's cart in the early morning. A chair in the break room bore a sticky note, reserved for someone who's never been invited to sit. A small, handwritten message was taped inside the elevator. If you're fighting alone, know that you're not the only one. No one mentioned Celeste. No one dared. But the way they looked at her in passing no longer carried dismissal. It carried something quieter, respect and anticipation. Celeste didn't need to reveal who she was. She didn't need to step forward. She simply continued wiping floors, straightening chairs, and quietly watched something beautiful unfold. That kindness, when no longer afraid, can spread like fire, silent but impossible to extinguish. The quarterly strategy meeting, the biggest annual event at Langford Global, was held in the main conference hall with over 300 core employees in attendance, live-streamed to dozens of global branches. Everything was arranged like a flawless play. The CFO would present the profit report, the head of HR would boast about a diversity strategy, and the CEO had yet to appear. No one realized the real CEO was sitting in the very last row, wearing a janitor's uniform and a name tag that read Clara. When Gregory Vale stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit his charcoal gray suit, slicked back hair, and a smile that made the audience nod in approval. But exactly 90 seconds into his presentation, the screen behind him flickered. A different file appeared. No music, no effects, just images cold and suffocatingly real. The first slide, an audio recording of Gregory from the late-night meeting, where he talked about squeezing interns dry like sponges. The entire hall fell silent. The second slide, an internal email from Sienna Walsh to her assistant listing names of those unfit for brand vision, with a note that read, "Maximum 3 people of color per floor." Whispers filled the room, heads began to turn, and no one remained still. Then, Celeste's voice echoed. Not from the stage. She didn't show her face, but the calm, steady tone filled the room through the speaker system. "I'm not a hacker. I'm just someone cleaning up the mess left behind by pretenders." She recounted small stories that no one thought would ever be seen: a cold cup of coffee thrown in a receptionist's face, a candidate rejected in a meeting because their name was hard to pronounce, and the silent tears of a woman who was pushed out of the company for daring to stand up for a colleague. "I've mopped floors, eavesdropped, picked up broken pieces, and watched you, not for revenge, but to understand what warped the empire my father built into what it is today." Every camera in the conference room now turned towards Celeste as she rose from the back row. The spotlight fell on a familiar face from old photos hanging in the company's lobby, the daughter of the founder. And before anyone could react, she added one final line. "Now I'll clean up one more thing. Not trash, but those who've treated people like it." The applause didn't come from the stage. It came from the upper floors, from foreign branches, from logistics workers to technicians, from those who had never had a voice. And for the first time, the expensive masks began to crack before the unwavering silence of a girl they once called the janitor. After the explosive meeting, social media erupted with the hashtag #ShashStandWithCeleste. News outlets ran headlines non-stop, and employees from multiple branches sent thank-you emails. It seemed like she had won. But Celeste quickly realized victory was never the end. It was only the beginning of a real war. Inside Langford Global, the atmosphere was tense, like a tightly drawn string. The ones she exposed didn't stay silent. Gregory was no longer in the boardroom, but the finance department now housed a new group, his loyalists operating quietly, issuing manipulated internal evaluations. They began painting Celeste as an emotional impulse, out of touch with operational realities and damaging to the company's image. Sienna Walsh didn't need to show her face. She only had to let a few rumors slip that Celeste's real aim was to seize control, that the entire expose had been a scripted performance serving her personal ambitions. A few fake emails began to circulate accusing Celeste of manipulating internal files and sabotaging recruitment procedures. Implausible, yes, but planting doubt was often enough to shake belief. Then came another blow. An anonymous group of employees filed a complaint to the board not because Celeste had done anything wrong, but because they no longer felt safe under her supervision. The media began to divide. Some articles praised her bravery, while others raised suspicion. Is Celeste abusing her family influence to take over the company? Worse still, those who once stood by her began to fall silent. Marcus, the IT engineer who first gave her evidence, was suddenly reassigned to a branch in Nevada. Rosie, the elderly receptionist, was abruptly handed a forced early retirement due to restructuring. The hallways where she once received respectful nods were now lined with averted gazes. She knew they didn't hate her. They were afraid, and that fear had been carefully planted. One night, returning late to her office, she found a message scrawled in red ink on her door. "Don't think you're untouchable." Celeste stood still. In her hand was the blueprint for a new employee benefits program she'd been working on. But now, the values she fought to protect weren't under direct attack. They were being eroded bit by people lurking in the shadows, manipulating public opinion and turning the good into villains. Have you ever been talked about behind your back just for doing the right thing? Leave a comment saying, "I still stand," if you've ever been hurt for telling the truth. Monday morning, an internal memo was sent to all employees. Langford Global would launch the Transparency and Shared Accountability Initiative, a comprehensive audit, led by an independent third party overseeing all personnel records, financial documents, complaint filings, and internal evaluation processes. The most striking part, the initiative was proposed by Celeste herself, and it couldn't be denied because it had already gathered nearly 10,000 employee signatures from across the globe in just 48 hours. No one on the board of directors could oppose it under the weight of public pressure. Sienna Walsh pressed her lips tight during the online meeting, while Gregory Vale, though currently on leave, could feel it too. The power game was no longer what it used to be. But Celeste didn't stop there. She organized open forums, no cameras, no superiors, where employees from logistics kitchens and tech departments were invited to speak their truth. In a room with just one chair and one microphone, what was said there touched the heart of an entire corporation. One worker had been asked to fetch coffee by their boss for 3 years without a single raise. An intern stayed up until 3 a.m., adjusting slides for a manager only to have their name removed from the credits. A disabled employee had no accessible path and was forced to use the freight elevator for 8 months because they didn't fit the brand image. All of these testimonies were compiled into a video series titled The Untold Langford, originally released for internal viewing, but it spread like wildfire. No narration, no conclusions, just real voices. And then Celeste made her final move. She invited someone no one expected to see: her grandfather, the retired co-founder of Langford Global, a man still regarded throughout the company as a symbol, a living legend, walked onto the stage, placed a hand on his granddaughter's shoulder, and said, "I built this company with one principle in mind. We don't sell products, we serve people. I didn't retire so you could use my name to trample that legacy." One sentence, one shockwave. It made every shareholder rise to their feet. It made the media rewrite their headlines, and it forced those who once cast shadows over Celeste to finally face the light. Have you ever been misunderstood? Ever isolated for speaking the truth? But then in time, proven right, leave a comment. The truth always finds its way home. Celeste Langford left Langford Global in silence. No grand farewell speech, no medal ceremony, no celebratory gala. But just weeks later, a photo went viral across social media. Celeste, in a charcoal grey coat, standing at the podium of the United Nations with the words behind her: rebuilding trust through integrity. She wasn't speaking as a CEO nor representing a financial empire. She stood there as an ordinary person, someone who dared to speak the truth, someone who stood tall in the storm. Her speech had no glittering script, just a simple truth that touched every soul. I once mopped floors in the company that bore my father's name. I was once called an intruder, dismissed because of where I came from. But I'm not here because I won. I'm here because I didn't back down. After that day, Celeste declined all offers to lead from major corporations. She didn't write a memoir. She didn't appear on television. Instead, she founded an organization named after her mother, the Evelyn Project, to protect and support those who had been punished for standing on the side of truth. No one had expected that someone once crushed by an entire system would be the one to rebuild the ethical foundation of corporate life. The world kept turning, but it no longer turned the same. Langford Global, after its crisis, established a wall of honor, engraving the names of those once cast out for their kindness. The first name etched in stone was not a CEO, not an investor, but Celeste Langford, the one who began without a title. Somewhere in a small bakery in New Jersey, people still spot Celeste. No cameras, no assistants helping a deaf staff member clean the counter. When the boy wrote on a whiteboard to thank her for helping his mother get her job back, she simply smiled and wrote, "I didn't do anything. Your mom earned it herself." Years later, a grainy phone-recorded video appeared on YouTube. No title, no edits. In it, Celeste was teaching in a small classroom. Power doesn't come from holding authority. It comes from walking into a room with no one knowing who you are and still choosing to do the right thing. At the end of the video, an older man, once the one who had fired her quietly, walked up and embraced her. He didn't say, "Sorry." He just choked up and whispered, "You didn't just change the company. You changed how I show up as a father." And that was the greatest victory. Not the triumph of holding her head high before those who once mocked her, but the triumph of living right and leaving behind a legacy of kindness. The most powerful lesson in this story isn't about fame. It's about conviction. Whether you hold power or not, have status or not, if you don't lose what's right in your heart, the world will eventually be forced to listen. Not because you shout, but because your silence is too righteous to ignore. If you believe that kindness is real strength, leave a comment. I choose to live with integrity. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story, where every story is a reminder that you too can change the world. Not with power, but with how you choose to live every single day. Because sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who dares to stand still without bowing. The story of Celeste Langford is not a heroic anthem written in applause or the glow of a spotlight. It is a quiet, yet powerful whisper about kindness, the very value that seems the most fragile, yet proves to be the strongest foundation for transforming an entire system. What made Celeste different wasn't her inheritance. It was the fact that she walked into a building bearing her family's name at the lowest rank, choosing to touch the truth with clean hands and an unresentful heart. She didn't dismantle power with vengeance. but with uncompromising silence. And that is what makes a true revolution. The greatest lesson from this story is this: you don't need a title to do what's right. You don't need validation to stay true to who you are. When you choose to live with kindness, conviction, and loyalty to the truth, even if the whole world turns its back on you, time will eventually stand on your side. Kindness is not weakness. It is the choice of the strongest, the ones who understand that sometimes silence is the most powerful form of resistance. I believe that in a world that often glorifies noise, it's those who choose to live quietly but righteously who truly make it better. If you've ever felt small for standing on the side of what's right, if you've been mocked for being too kind or too soft, remember Celeste. Remember that the kindness people scoff at today may be the very force that heals a generation tomorrow. And if this story moved you, if you felt even for a moment like you too have walked silently through days, just trying to live with integrity, then don't let that end here. Leave a comment: I choose to live with integrity. Share this video so that someone out there, someone who's losing faith in kindness, knows they're not alone. And most importantly, subscribe to Toch Story and turn on notifications, because every week we bring you stories that inspire, stories that touch the heart and make you feel happier, more loving, or stronger by the time the video ends. Because the world doesn't need more people shouting. It needs more people who dare to live right quietly, but with unshakable resolve. And if today you haven't yet been recognized, remember, this integrity always has a voice. It just speaks slower but deeper than anything else ever could.